Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Sammamish City Council regular meeting for Tuesday, June 17th, 2025. If we could call this meeting to order, please, and do roll call, please.
Mayor Karen Howe.
Here.
Deputy Mayor Amy Lamb. Here. Councilmember Kaylee Clark.
Here.
Councilmember Pamela Stewart.
Here.
Councilmember Kent Treen.
Present.
Councilmember Sid Gupta.
Here.
Councilmember Roisin O'Farrell.
Here.
Thank you.
Thank you. And if Councilmember Clark could lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much. Councilmember Stewart with the land acknowledgement, please.
Yes, the city is a proud partner of the Snoqualmie tribe, and we feel it's important to recognize the history and connection tribes have always had to these lands. We acknowledge that we are on the indigenous land of Coast Salish peoples who have reserved treaty rights to this land, specifically the Snoqualmie Indian tribe. We thank these caretakers of this land who have lived and continue to live here since time immemorial.
Thank you. Is there a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries. Thank you very much. We'll be moving into public comment. It looks like we have a lot of people here. I will try to keep us to 30 minutes of public comment. You each have 3 minutes of public comment. And we will start in the room. We will go to online when we're done within the room. We'll start with Darcy Donovan. Thank you.
Good evening, Mayor, Deputy Mayor, and City Council. My name is Darcy Donovan. I'm the president of Local 1425, representing the Sammamish employees. We're here tonight because we have serious concerns about the city's direction with the new merit pay system, and we hope to provide the council with some insight into how we got here. During contract negotiations, the city and the union agreed to collaborate outside of the contract process to develop a new employee evaluation and associated merit pay system. We set out to create a system that would incentivize and reward consistently good work, identify and correct unsatisfactory performance, and provide tools to help employees grow and people managers to effectively manage. After a year of work, the city and union created a new evaluation system, which was rolled out at the beginning of this year. While we have been successful in creating a new evaluation system together, we have found that we fundamentally disagree on how employees should be compensated based on the results of their evaluation. Sadly, the city has taken a stance, and I quote, "The city cannot reward the low bar of meeting expectations." Instead, the city proposes only providing raises to those employees who exceed expectations. But let's consider this for a moment. The city sets expectations for employees. If the city is not satisfied with employees who meet expectations, perhaps it needs to reevaluate the quality of the expectations it is setting or the effectiveness of the management it is providing. Ironically, the city's own job description states that employees are expected to go above and beyond, and the performance evaluation system now expects staff to consistently innovate, just to be considered as meeting expectations. How can employees possibly exceed expectations when innovation and going the extra mile are defined as the bare minimum? This creates a system that sets up an unrealistic standard and leaves employees feeling unvalued and no matter how hard they work. Further, let's look into what it has meant for employees to meet expectations. It has meant crews working around the clock to clear roads and keep City Hall open during the bomb cyclone last fall. It has meant park teams that maintain and present some of the best parks in the county and also plan and host the most popular community events like the 4th on the Plateau. It has also meant that the plow teams working around the clock to clear roads when the snow falls. It has meant the policy teams that ensure the city complies with state laws and develops award-winning plans. It has meant consistent results for the community and maintaining levels of service while being understaffed. It has meant that everyday work that keeps the city going. It is, I'm going to be using Lisa's time, if you don't mind. She deferred her time.
Actually, if you have someone else that can take your notes and read, that'd be great. Each person gets 3 minutes.
She doesn't want to. Is that okay?
Each person gets 3 minutes.
There you go. There you go. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. This is what it looks like when staff meet expectations. The city should be proud of its employees that work so hard to live up to its expectations. Instead, the city intends to reward this good work with nothing. Further, rewarding those who only exceed expectations is an inequitable practice, as not all positions are provided the same clear opportunities to exceed. Creating this standard will result in only a select few seeing their salaries grow, while leaving the vast majority of hardworking employees feeling demoralized and left behind. What is even more disappointing is how the evaluation scoring has played out in practice since being put in place at the start of the year. It has become evident that HR and leadership have their finger on the scale, limiting the number of exceeds expectations given out. We've seen multiple cases where HR have asked managers to review, justify, and ultimately lower performance ratings when an employee is awarded multiple exceeds expectation scores. Effectively, the city wants to tie an employee's career progression to exceeding expectations while simultaneously making it impossible to actually achieve that metric. We are not unsympathetic to the budget issues that council is facing. We have tried to work with the city to develop creative proposals that would reduce the short-term budgetary impact of employee wage progression while still demonstrating that the city values its employees. Sadly, the response to these ideas was simply no. One of the key budget philosophies that council adopted last fall was to hold staff harmless. The city's proposal fails in that. It is trying to claw budget savings off the backs of its hard-working employees by punishing those who live up to the city's expectations. At the February 8th City Council retreat, your own consultant stated at 1 hour, 4 minutes, and 31 seconds, "My professional opinion is that you are not overstaffed by a long shot. You are probably understaffed." Employees often hear, both from the City Council and the manager's office alike, that we are deeply valued and that we do fantastic work. This makes those words ring hollow. The attrition rate is high and staff morale is low. We are discouraged and employees are leaving or looking elsewhere. Those who stay will stop going the extra mile, not out of laziness, but out of disillusionment. After months of failed negotiations that have left us demoralized and unvalued, staff have come tonight to ask City Council for its support. We ask that City Council direct the City Manager's Office to work with the union to develop a merit pay system that fairly and equitably compensates employees who meet the city's expectations. We also ask that any agreement be rightfully retroactive to January 1st, 2025. We need a system that rewards the city's hard-working employees and ensures Sammamish will retain competitive with the market and be able to retain and attract great employees. It's also important to note that funding for employees' raises was already included in the city's adopted 25-26 budget. This is not a new or unforeseen cost. It was anticipated and approved by council as part of the city's financial planning. Thank you, and we appreciate your time.
Thank you. Roger Moeller.
Good evening. My name is Roger Moeller. I'm the staff representative assigned to represent Local 1425 City of Sammamish employees. Darcy stole much of my presentation tonight, so good on her. She was that thorough. I just want to say that we're disappointed in how this has all worked out. We made every effort at the table to reach an understanding with the employer, and everything we proposed was turned down. This performance pay concept is a departure from the past, and in a significant way. And the employees have made a leap of faith and not been rewarded for that leap of faith. And so this has been very frustrating to us, and whatever level of trust existed between the employees in the city is now gone. And that's very unfortunate. So, thank you for your time.
Thank you. Lisa Weir. Oh, you, okay, so Jennifer Kim.
My name is Jennifer Kim, and my comment is for the draft SEIS for the town center. I'm asking the council not to approve the additional 2,000 housing units at the town center because our city lacks the infrastructure to support it. Several of you have told me that you want to double the units because you want affordable housing and for your children to be able to afford to live here. In order for affordable housing to be successful, you need transit, jobs, and services. Affordable housing works best near transit corridors. King County hasn't brought more transit to Sammamish in a decade. In fact, we lost 2 bus routes during COVID. Sammamish has only 2 bus lines that operates Monday through Friday, plus the fact that 228th can't be widened for additional lanes or bus turnouts. There are not enough employment opportunities or adequate services for affordable housing in Sammamish. The city should have those in place before trying to build it here. You say that you need the tax dollars from the town center to fix our city deficit, yet you keep giving millions of taxpayer dollars to the town center developer for things he's responsible to pay for, like 4th Street or 6th Street or the town square. Sammamish doesn't have enough roads, schools, or funding to support 4,000 more housing units on 228th. Doubling the housing units with our current infrastructure issues is like adding another story to your house when the foundation is cracked. Many residents I've spoken to aren't even aware of what's happening at the town center. Given the enormity of this decision and the impact that it will have, I find it interesting that the city hasn't broadcasted this information more widely to all the residents. The previous councils sought public input on the town center. There were committees and extensive surveys where they listened to what the residents wanted. Last week, the city hosted an open house for the town center during the farmers market that didn't give really any useful information. At the mayor's address last month, doubling the housing units wasn't even mentioned, and it wasn't in the latest edition of the Sammamish City newsletter either. It almost seems like the city council doesn't want residents to know about this or cares about their input. Why is that? A good leader acts in the best interest of the people that they have committed to serve, even at the expense of their own personal interests or political ideologies. As our city's elected officials, isn't your job to serve the residents who are living here now? Or are you more concerned with the future residents who don't live here yet? I ask the council not to approve the additional housing units at the town center. Thank you.
Thank you. Jason Kiefer.
Hello, my name is Jason Keffer. I live at 23811 Northeast 14th Street here in Sammamish. That's my parents' address for reasons that will be clear shortly. I first moved to Sammamish in 1991. I don't believe this was a city then. And I recently, after some time in other states, got a chance to move me and my family back to the Pacific Northwest, which I was very excited about. And I was excited about the possibility of bringing my family to the community that had served me so well, where I had grown up, gone to school, gone to church, met friends. You know, I've come back over the years for weddings, funerals, friends, family, all of the above. And I was really excited until I went to look for a home, and I couldn't afford it. I couldn't, even in an expensive region, Sammamish is uniquely expensive, incredibly expensive. Affordable in Sammamish means $1.5 million. $1.4 million? I can't afford that, and I have a nice job. So I wanted to come here and advocate for the town center, for your kids, because I'm not going to live next to my parents. I can't afford it. I just moved from Salt Lake. I'm selling my house there. It's a nice house. It cost almost 1.5 times or 2.5 times more in Sammamish. I saw a house recently next to my parents that was $2 million. It was a nice house. It was nothing fancy. It was the same as waterfront property on Rainier Avenue. That's ridiculous. So I would like to say yes to the 4,000 homes. Yes to more homes. This is a great and wonderful community with wonderful schools that I got to grow up and go to. But my kids won't be able to do that. So I'm here to say yes to more housing.
Thank you. If there are no more comments in the room, we'll go to online.
Per the reasonable accommodation, if you had pre-registered by 5 o'clock today and would like to provide comment, please raise your hand. Heather Murphy Rains.
Can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
My name is Heather Murphy Rains, and I'm a proud resident of Sammamish for over 20 years. Our family moved here because we fell in love with the character of this community, our majestic trees, our clean lakes, our quiet neighborhoods, and the safety and quality of the life it offered our young family. Backyards for our kids, trampolines, swings, trails for our dogs. That's the Sammamish we chose. Wednesday, I spoke to Council Member Pam Stewart at the Farmer Market at the entrance to the SEIS open house, where our grassroots group, Save Our Sammamish, was holding a peaceful protest outside, voicing concern over the high-density development studied in the SEIS. We conversed in a friendly but spirited manner. My husband and I shared concerns that housing development was being pushed in every East Side community, regardless of whether that community had the infrastructure, transit access, or public services to support it. Meanwhile, tree canopy was lost and debt was loaded onto cities, which isn't equitable, isn't responsible, and in my view, qualifies as modern sprawl. I also voiced concerns about how this growth model displaces our seniors and renters, people on fixed incomes through regressive taxation and higher costs, all for the benefit of future residents. Council Member Stewart disagreed. She referenced her East Coast experience and she said she knows what real sprawl is. Then she turned to me and said, "If you want to live in rural, you should just move." I was stunned. So was a fellow Sammamish resident, an immigrant and longtime homeowner behind me. She immediately responded, "Why should we move?" Let me be clear, I did not move here for rural. I moved here for Sammamish, a lush, suburban, forested bedroom community with high-performing schools, low crime, strong neighborhoods, and a space for families to grow. That's what brought so many of us here. So to be told to move is just ridiculous. That's what brought many of us here. So why is this council now intently, fundamentally set on transforming it? I'm proud to say U.S. News and World Report just named Sammamish the 11th best place to live in America. So if we were promised over, and now we were promised over a decade ago, a vibrant town center with civic amenities and retail core, what we're getting instead is up to 4,000 housing units without concrete plans for the promised retail. You say you're not in the building business, yet housing is suddenly the top priority. Surveys from just a few hundred people are now being used to reshape a city of over 5,000 people. Let's be honest, these 4,000 units are not mandated. It's a policy choice. What's worse, the response we get when we speak up is to be told to just move if we disagree, which is tone deaf and a betrayal of the democratic process. Elected officials are not here to gatekeep who belongs. You're here to represent all of us. And that includes those of us who cherish the suburban character of our city. We are not anti-housing. We are not anti-growth. We are pro-Sammamish. We want a future rooted in environmentalism, sustainability, safety, and community, not one that's dictated by developers, regional ambitions, or dismissive leadership. We will not be told to leave our homes simply because we care enough to speak up. I hope the city will remember its duty.
Thank you.
Please don't tell us to move.
I will now promote the second commenter. Mr. Stickney.
Good evening, City Council. Paul Stickney, Sammamish. This comment is in addition to the written comment I turned in today. When does 3 equal 6 And when does 7 equal 1.8? Well, in real estate, in contracts, there are many times when we put 3 days in a contract, but because weekends and holidays don't count, it has the effect of 6. So sometimes a number has a different effect, which is the point of my conversation this evening. Let's look at some housing numbers over past time in our city. Before 1980, King County, there were about 3,000 houses in Sammamish. From 1980 to 1999, under King County, 13,000 houses were allowed. That's a pace of about 650 a year. At incorporation in the King County pipeline, there were about 3,500 homes. Over 6 years, those were built out. That's a pace of about 580 homes a year average. Now, in Sammamish, from 2006 to 2024, some 3,500 homes were constructed. That's a pace of about 185 homes a year. And up to this point, all those homes combined are about 85% single family and 15% multifamily. So when does 7 equal 1.8? I've been advocating for adding 5,000 market rate B and C housing units from 500,000 to 1.4 million and some high-end condos to the 2,100A. Well, those units on average create about 1/4 of the traffic and students. So the equivalent of 7,100 A, B, and C housing units is equal to about 1,800 D. Over 20 years, that's about 90 homes a year. So how do those percentages stack up? Well, that proposed change of building out 7,100 affordable and market over 20 years is 14% of the King County pace, 16% of the pipeline pace from King County, and 50% of the Sammamish pace. But what do we get? We get what we don't have. We get 7,100 housing units that are genuinely needed rather than 1,700 more single-family homes, which would, of course, sell, but we have an oversupply relative to our internal needs. So my ask is to pivot fearlessly and add appropriate, genuine market rate needs that are long overdue to our comp plan, and then with that information in hand, reassess town center alternatives and work on this on a citywide and centers scale. Appreciate the opportunity.
Thank you.
That's all for public comment. Thank you.
We will now be going into a closed session to discuss collective bargaining pursuant to RCW 42.30.140 paren 4 paren B. We will be approximately 15 minutes. Council is not expected to take action.
Council will be returning at 7:08. The council is extending the closed session to 7:18 p.m. The closed session is extended until 7:23 p.m. Thank you. The closed session has been extended to 7:28 p.m.
Okay, thank you for your patience, everyone. So I'm looking for a motion to approve the consent calendar.
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. Moved and seconded. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Okay, motion carries. Thank you. So, on to unfinished business. So we have first a resolution and adoption of the city's first arts strategic plan. So we should have Anjali, Janie, Emily, and Leslie, and I think Sarah. Thank you.
Good evening, Madam Mayor, City Council, Mr. City Manager. I'm Anjali Maya, Director of Parks and Recreation. We have for Council's consideration tonight the adoption of the Arts Strategic Plan. Joining us online is the city's consultant from Framework, Leslie Bain. And in the room is Janie Walzer, Management Analyst, and Emily Scott, our Recreation and Cultural Services Manager and Staff Liaison to the Arts Commission. With that, I'll turn it over to Janie for a short presentation.
Thank you. Okay. So the Arts Commission was established in 2003, but until now it's operated without a formal guiding document. It's had a lot of great work over the years, but there's also been a clear need for some more structure, consistency, and a long-term vision. And that's what this strategic plan is going to provide for us. It gives both staff and the commissioners a shared roadmap for how we can support arts and culture in Sammamish moving forward. Tonight, we're asking for your adoption of the plan, which the Arts Commission unanimously voted to recommend earlier this month. This plan reflects collaboration from the very beginning, and Council has played an important role throughout. You authorized the project in January of 2024, and then the contract was awarded in June to our consultant Framework. In March of this year, you reviewed the draft action statement and goals and gave feedback, as well as in May, of review of the draft plan, and your feedback was incorporated into the draft that we're bringing forward today. So here we are in June, ready for final adoption. The scope of the work for the contract that you approved last year outlines some clear goals for what this plan hopes to accomplish. It defines roles for arts commissioners. It sets up consistent procedures for programming for public art, also recommends strategies for funding and grants, and creates a long-term public art work plan. These goals shape the consultant's work from start to finish, and over the past year, they completed an inventory of our current arts program. They conducted peer city research and led robust community engagement. They also incorporated council and commission feedback. So let's walk through what the plan is and how it's structured. It's organized into 4 main chapters that build on each other and set us up for a strong foundation moving forward. Chapter 1 is the introduction and executive summary. It lays out why we created the plan and what it's meant to do. It also explains that we're a contract city and Sammamish isn't looking to overhaul staffing at this time, but rather we're aiming to be more strategic with the resources we have and make sure that our investments provide real community benefit. Oops. Chapter 2 gives us a snapshot of where we are today. So it looks at our existing programs, like our public art installations, the rotating exhibits that we do here at City Hall, and some of our programming, for example, the Ferry House Trail that we put in the parks. And then it also outlines different roles that the city plays. So we are a host, a funder, a partner, and then also an information hub. Chapter 3 focuses on community engagement, so what we heard from the community. Through surveys, events, and focus groups, we saw that there was a clear alignment on art that reflects nature, celebrates the cultural diversity in our community, and also brings generations together. People really value art that's visible, interactive, and accessible to everybody. Chapter 4 sets the stage for action. It introduces that action statement that's rooted in the city's larger vision and the community feedback that we heard. From there, it lays out clear goals around public art, events, and capacity building, and connects those strategies that help us stay focused and make the most of our time and funding. And finally, there is the toolkit. It's included as a companion to the plan. It isn't something that we're asking you to formally adopt because it's designed to be flexible. It's something that commission and staff can update over time as needs evolve. But it includes things like the project selection criteria, budgeting tools, and templates for commissioning art. Then just a review of the timeline. Last year, we focused on gathering input from listening to the community. And then this past winter, our consultant Framework used that input and also feedback from staff, commission, and council to write the draft. And everything made it into the final document. There's also an exhibit in your agenda bill that outlines exactly what was changed based on your input and the questions that we received from you. Answers are in the exhibit. So the Arts Commission reviewed the final version of the Art Strategic Plan earlier this month, and they didn't request any edits. They expressed strong support for the direction and the content of the plan. On June 2nd, they unanimously voted to recommend adoption to City Council, and they're excited to start using the plan to guide their future work. And with that, we respectfully request a motion to adopt the Art Strategic Plan. So I'll turn it back to Mayor Howe. Thank you.
And thank you for the presentation. Council, do you have questions? Deputy Mayor Lamb.
I don't have a question, but I wanted to thank the consultant and the staff for working on this plan. I think it's much needed. I was speaking to somebody on the Arts Commission a couple weeks ago, and she was really excited about it. The things I'm excited about is the toolkit. I think it'll be really helpful for them to have some of the templates. And I also think it's, because so much of funding comes from grants, for them to have a workshop and to learn how to write grant proposals. I think that's like so important. So I am super supportive of this, and I'm really glad to see it happening this year.
Thank you. Councilmember Stewart.
Yeah, so I'm going to channel a member of the audience here, a member who's watching. So do you feel like with this framework and scoring and all the things that we have, that we'll be able to accommodate when I think people come to the Arts Commission and they have good ideas like, you know, having memorials to recognize, you know, service members and veterans and things like that? Do you feel like this will accommodate those types of things? Because I think in the past, right, we've had some frustration where it's really hard to get an idea off the ground, right? People come to us and they have great ideas, and it's really hard to kind of channel that somewhere.
Sure. So through the toolkit, that'll be really helpful for accomplishing that. And creating a 2-year work plan is something that the toolkit will help the commissioners do. So at the beginning of every year, they hope to have a retreat where they can talk about their work plan. And at that time, community can bring forward ideas, and it can go through the project selection criteria and make sure that it meets all of our criteria, and then get assigned a commissioner who's interested in bringing it forward and really take it from there.
Great, because I think, and that is exciting, because I know, like I said, we kind of worked and sort of hit a dead end where it was like, we have this great idea, we have community support for it, but there wasn't really anywhere to channel it. So I'm excited that will open that avenue up, and I think we probably have a couple of ideas to get queued up right away. Thanks.
Would someone like to make a motion?
I move that we approve the Art Strategic Plan.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Would you like to speak to your motion?
Thank you to staff. Thank you to the consultant. Very excited.
I'll speak to the motion just briefly and just say that I look forward to seeing it implemented and then checking back in to see how it worked. Because I think it's one of those things that it looks great, sounds great, it will be great, I know. And you're going to find tweaks that you're going to want to suggest. So I'm delighted that it's flexible enough that it will allow us to be able to evolve it over time. So with that, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Council.
Thank you. We're moving to the next presentation, which is a pre-release on the Draft Town Center Code. So we have Matt Brandmeier and Jeff Arango, I believe.
Okay, great. Good evening, Mayor, City Council members, Jeff Arango with Framework, and we're here to give a preview of the update to the Town Center Code, which we've been working on. in the background for several months now. Primary topic tonight is to give you an introduction into the code. Many of these topics were touched on in our last presentation related to the updates to the plan and the SEIS, but we are providing some additional detail in terms of what is included in the draft code. So just a refresher, in terms of planning context, one of the primary drivers of this project is to align the code and the plan with desired outcomes of emphasizing the implementation of local, regional, and state priorities, which are continuing to be required of the city and all cities through some recent legislation. Looking at new reporting and accountability regarding planning and housing, there was just a new bill, which I touched on in my last presentation, around accountability for implementing the housing element. There's reporting that has to be done on the comprehensive plan outcomes in 5 years from now. And so we're mindful of setting the city up for success there. And one of the important things to note is that the current town center code in particular is a barrier to achieving the desired outcomes, and we're looking to align those things through this update. So we'll touch on just a few of the code audit findings, which is a significant effort last year in order to look at the code in detail. One overall, which should be emphasized, is that the code is just really confusing to use, it's hard to administer, and there's a lot of discretion that's involved, which can put staff in a difficult position. The town center code, the way it's structured, it's its own kind of section. And when this was put into place, Sammamish being a new city was relying on a lot of the old King County code. So I've taken that approach in some of my code work. When you have an overall structure that doesn't work that well, the strategy is to create your own section. At this point, we've gone through the process of making significant updates to the code and creating a unified development code. So the town center is sort of its own island now, and I think there's opportunities for better integration over time, although we have been focused really on the fundamental issues that came out of the code audit. There's a misalignment between development standards and density. If you read the density tables, the densities are relatively low, yet you can build up to 70 feet in height. You're only able to achieve those densities through a system of incentives, of which most of those have been exhausted. So it creates a sort of winners and losers in terms of who can access and use those credits. Some of the standards around residential density and commercial allocations are overly prescriptive. Again, if you looked at the code, for example, in the A zone, it would say the maximum density is 40 units an acre. The Sky Apartments is probably more like 100 units an acre. That's because it's drawing density from some of the other lands. Other projects can become much more dense through the use of incentives, of which those have mostly been exhausted, although they are supporting projects that are currently in the pipeline and have not been delivered. There's many duplicative sections in the town center code and the UDC. For example, there's a lengthy section on signs and a lengthy section on parking, both of which are also in the UDC. The other thing we should think about is there may be some pieces of code we're developing for town center, like parking standards or things that we might want to apply in other parts of the city. And so having some flexibility around that is also really important. The standards and the visuals are not clear, difficult to apply. And again, this has created challenges for applicants in the city. Commercial space allocations don't align with market realities. They were envisioned most of the commercial to happen up in the core, which from a kind of planning and city building perspective makes sense, but the reality is the market is more driven by access to 228th, and that's why you see projects like the Met Market developed there at Sammamish Village. The incentives have been depleted, including both the bonus pool and the TDRs, and those are in projects that are in the pipeline. And then finally, the unified zone development permit process is very cumbersome, difficult to use, particularly for smaller property owners. They have to go through this lengthy process even to just get authorization for permitted uses that are identified in the code as an example. And this was something we heard from property owners during the discussion we had with them during some of our focus group meetings. Basically, they're not able to move forward with development on their sites because of some of these challenges. So the current zoning is shown in the map in the middle, and you can see that it envisioned kind of multiple nodes of development, mixed-use centers. Again, good planning intent, but not really aligned with the market realities. For example, the Sammamish Village, which I just mentioned, was not actually in the A zone. It was only able to develop that way because it is adjacent to the A zone. So the proposed alternative over on the right simplifies that down to 3 districts. It maintains the concept of the wedding cake where you have a central core and sort of more flexibility and lower scale development along the edges. And then the lighter blue district is intended to be like a middle housing district, similar to one of the overlays that we implemented in the R zones throughout the city to comply with the middle housing rules. We are planning to implement a form-based code, which will emphasize more the physical qualities we would like to see in the town center. So really inviting and attractive streetscapes, nice building facades, active ground floor uses where the market can deliver that, safe places for people to walk and bike. And so the form-based code, I think, is a real opportunity to improve the ability for the city to administer the code, as well as delivering improved outcomes as part of this project. The land use charts in the town center code are quite cumbersome. It breaks out the tables sort of by use categories. And this is just one example of sort of an overemphasis on uses that really don't have, in some cases, a fundamental difference. So for example, there's numerous kinds of retail stores listed there, fabric and something shop, hobby and toy and games. You know, those can just be general retail and really just simplify that. So that's, I think, a good example of some of the cleanup and simplification we're doing as part of this process. And then currently, where there's a U listed, you have to use the UZDP process in order to use that, authorize that use. And in some cases, it could be a small store on a small parcel, and that process is not really intended to operate at that scale, and it becomes very challenging for property owners to be able to move forward. So a big driver of this project is facilitating more affordable housing in line with the charges we've been given from the state and county and regional entities. So we are looking at new requirements for affordable housing, as well as implementing the multifamily tax exemption, which has proven to be a powerful tool for delivering both market and affordable housing projects. This is an example in Seattle called the Heartwood. It's an affordable housing project. It's also a mass timber building, and it is at that about 85-foot height level. It might be more like 80. But again, this would represent something that we might want to offer through incentives. Those could include using remaining TDR credits, adding additional affordable housing, or any sort of array of public benefits that are aligned with the flexibility that would be provided through the code. The city still has interim street standards that are in the code right now, despite the original code and plan being adopted more than 15 years ago. So as part of our charge, we're developing permanent street standards. Those will be in the town center code, and then there'll be more details as part of a update to the public works standards. These will deal with things like dimensions for sidewalks, where there's on-street parking, when and where and how we provide bike facilities, integration of green landscape and street trees, furniture, lighting, all of the amenities that make an attractive town center. So we're looking forward to implementing these and facilitating the build out of the street network in town center, which is really important for the overall success. Parking requirements was brought up in some of our previous discussions about whether we wanted to take a look at those, and the state has decided to preempt the cities on that. So one of the recent bills puts limits on what cities can require for parking. I want to be really clear that this does not include a maximum level of parking. So if applicants want to provide more parking, they will do so. There are often things built into financing mechanisms and marketability factors that are considered by developers and might cause them to build more parking, but it's not going to be because of a requirement. So this is basically verbatim from the state law. Duplex and townhouse, I think in the bill it's described as single family and multifamily. It's between 0.5 and 1 unit. Ground floor commercial uses in a mixed use building, no requirement. Limits on commercial space in general, you'll see at the bottom, restaurants, 1 per 2,000 square feet, which is significantly less than many cities would require. What you see crossed out there for town center currently is a more common standard. So it's a significant change, but again, I think applicants may choose to build more parking if they see a benefit in doing so. So in lieu of the UZDP process, which again had good intentions of providing a process for applicants to work together, perhaps if they share common boundaries, and for the public to be able to participate in the review process. So in lieu of that, we're proposing what's called a master concept plan. It's not intended to be super detailed or necessarily lead to vesting, but particularly for larger sites and those that will be building out the street network, it's helpful to have some dialogue with the city and some agreement on the basic parameters of that. This graphic here is simply intended to show kind of the level of detail that we would be looking at, more of an illustrative plan than a detailed engineering plan, which will come later. We are envisioning the ability to do the master concept plan and the commercial site development permit concurrently if the applicant so desires. Largely, this would be optional for smaller sites. If a property owner has more than 5 contiguous acres, they'd be required to go through this process, in large part because that would involve building out streets and needs to be coordination with the city on that. So hopefully this will be a good tool for both the city and applicants to provide clarity and collaboration early in the process. So affordable housing and TDRs are 2 important factors that we're looking at. You may recall, did some financial feasibility modeling last year. And we're at an interesting time overall in the housing market, such that the financing and delivery of new market rate projects, even if there are no requirements, in most cases are infeasible. If they are feasible, it's because they have very high rents in those communities and can support the cost of construction. So that is one of the challenges that we're trying to work through is, setting a percentage of affordable housing for projects that are not feasible today will have an impact in terms of when those projects will become feasible. We have looked at some data, I think it was for the city of Seattle, but if you look at sort of the pipeline of units over, say, the last 10 years, it's pretty consistent. You get to now and it's like very small. And that's because, again, what you're seeing being developed are projects that were financed under different conditions. So it's a very challenging time, but we are hopeful that we'll be able to come to a good solution here. We've been working closely with Arch. We still have Kidder Matthews on our team to support us. And we look forward to coming back to you with more details on that. The TDR program, you may recall, does not require affordability associated with it. So if you're using TDR credits, you don't have to provide affordable housing because you're providing a different type of public benefit. Going forward, the current plan would be to honor the existing TDR credits and those that are still available. There could also be the option, which is in the SEIS in the plan, to potentially allow additional height in exchange for, say, the use of TDRs, additional affordable housing, or other potential public benefits. So I think those 2 kind of goals can work, just understanding that in some cases you might only get TDRs or affordable housing because of how those work together. Another really exciting proposal that we want, I don't think we have fully introduced to you, is what we're calling the eco factor, the Sammamish eco factor. It's often referred to in other communities as the green factor, including Kirkland and the city of Seattle. So if you've spent time in any of those cities and noticed some very lush streetscapes, street trees, as well as plantings, trees on buildings, in sort of open spaces. It's all because of this program called the Green Factor, which I think was originally adapted from Denmark or somewhere in that neighborhood. And what it is a flexible point-based system to integrate trees, landscape, green design into projects in a very flexible way. You can put it on your own individual site. You can put it in the streetscape. You can put it on a green roof. You could put it on terraces. You could put it around your parking lot. There's a lot of options to be able to do that, but it's very visible and very impactful. There's a scoring sheet, so it's relatively easy to administer as well, which is great. And this is just a sample of how the points work. There's a certain minimum requirement, and you go through the process and produce your scoring sheet. And we think this will be a really impactful feature for Town Center, and I think address a lot of the goals that have been both in the comprehensive plan and in the updated Town Center plan to deliver sort of the environmental values that we know are important to the community. Along those lines, we've also been coordinating with Rose, the sustainability coordinator, and looking at opportunities for green building incentives. We're looking to provide kind of a placeholder in the code to add green building incentives. I know the city's done a lot of research and coordination with other cities that have these programs already in place in order to have some lessons learned. And we look forward to this coming back next year and being an integral part of the Town Center Code.
Matt Brandmeier, Deputy Director of Community Development. Just wanted to go over a couple slides on where we are in the process and what we have coming up before we start with the questions. We are currently within the SEIS comment period, the 30-day period. The SEIS was published on June 9th, and that comment period ends on July 9th. On Monday, this coming Monday on the 23rd, we will be publishing the draft code, which Jeff spoke about tonight. The next time we come back before the City Council will be on July 15th to have a preview of those comments and then also choose the alternative identified in the SEIS. So it's either the no action alternative or the action alternative. You'll see that in a couple of weeks. The upcoming events include an open house on June 25th. That's next Wednesday. It'll be a similar format to what we had last week for the SEIS and the plan, but this will be more focused on the code. And in that open house, we'll have tables for people to discuss, the utilities, capacities, and kind of all of those things that kind of go into the code and the permitting side of town center development. That same day in the afternoon, we will be meeting with other government agencies and public services to kind of go over each of the documents and talk about concerns or issues. We have been communicating and meeting with them since, well, I know they have for a couple years, but we have through this process since January. Had an ongoing conversation with the different public agencies. And then after, I believe, after we choose the alternative on July 15th, we will publish the final EIS in August, and then from there we'll start the public hearings and start the review and adoption process. We have a few questions on the screen, but at this time we'd like to open it up for questions and hopefully we can answer.
Thank you for the presentation. And we'll start with Council Member Gupta, please.
Thank you for the presentation. I had one question about the green area ratio. So I understand it's the point-based. So is the intent that every property that's developed has to achieve a certain score? So they have a menu of options, but they have to do a certain combination of them?
That's correct.
Okay. I'm very excited to see what that looks like. And a second question, I know we talked about transfer development rights. Is it still on our work plan to update the internal, or intra-city TDR program? Is that still coming?
Yes, that's correct. Yeah, that would be different than the King County TDR program, which is mostly exhausted.
And that's coming later this year, is the intention? TBD?
TBD.
Okay, thank you.
Deputy Mayor Lamb.
Just following up on what Councilmember Gupta was talking about the eco factor. Is it possible to tie each of those items to some sort of measurable, like how much carbon, how much GHG you're saving? It'd be interesting to add that all up, and just thinking about like how 6th Street now is like we've taken away some of the impervious surfaces. Like, can we sort of measure all of the things that we're doing that is positive for the environment? I think it would just be great to have that sort of measurable, since we do have a climate action plan, and to just, have that information.
So, yeah, that's something we'd be happy to take a look at. I don't have an answer for you this evening, but I think that would be possible to put something together that would start to quantify that. And there are some examples that we could bring forward to kind of show you how this has been applied in some of the cities that have implemented it, and then see what we can do. So we'll follow up on that.
Okay. The only other comment was about the form-based code. I just did a little bit more reading on that over the weekend, which I think is really great. So for the neighborhood centers, is that something that we'd also be using form-based code?
Definitely something that we could consider for the other mixed-use centers and the neighborhood center. I think that's something that the city should consider. And we have been mindful to give some thought about how the system we're setting up could be applied to other areas. And that's fairly easy to do. So I definitely think that's something the city should consider going forward.
Yeah, just like looking at the pictures and just seeing, the comparisons between like sort of these vibrant streetscapes and, comparing it to like a vast swath of single family homes. It's amazing. It's unfortunate that cities have not used form-based code since the beginning.
Yeah, agreed.
Thank you.
Councilmember Stewart.
Yeah, thank you. And I think this is great. I think the more we can communicate, I know the city has been putting this out and sharing this out to everyone, but I think the more we can talk about it and let people know that we're putting it out there. I did get one question today, which is a fear that the form-based code would lead to only building studio and one-bedroom units as opposed to two-bedroom. So can you address why that's true or not true, or likely not true, or whatever the answer is?
Yeah, there's no requirement on unit mix, and a form-based code actually would be the opposite of being prescriptive in the sense that if you had a larger number of studios or a smaller number of 2 or 3 bedrooms, that's the applicant's choice, not something that the city is choosing to regulate. There are other things that would be impacted by that, like traffic and currency and parking considerations and so on and so forth. But no, form-based code would not limit or dictate the specific unit sizes or having to have small units.
Yeah, I think the concern, and I just want to make sure we kind of address these questions head on, is that it lifts any dwellings per acre limit, and therefore that would encourage the developer to build more units that were smaller for the space, I think is what they were getting at.
Yeah, I mean, there's always some hidden kind of economic incentives that are built into any system, but I don't think that's really any different than someone trying to maximize the density if there are per unit acres per unit. Yeah.
Yeah, and just to point out, so an increase in yield like that is not, it is an increase in revenue, but potentially, but it's also an increase in cost.
Right.
So, it's likely that they would provide a mix
if they have, the flexibility to do that. And I think that's what we're trying to promote.
Yeah, and if there is any, if there are any cities that have done things like this where we can look and show, that that's not the case, or again, if it is the case, but to just, if there is anything like that, I think that would be great. I think it would also be important because we are getting a lot of concerns about environmental impacts. I know I did my own set of tree calculations where I looked at the tree canopy coverage, right, where the city R1 and R4 has a 55% tree coverage. The town center zones on average have a 45% coverage, and, compared building 169 units in an apartment building, which takes up just less than a 1 acre footprint, and that would take out 1 acre of tree canopy and about 62 significant trees, versus building that same number of units on R4 would take 50 acres of land and would take out over 1,000 significant trees. So I think to the extent that we can put that kind of information out there and share with people, that the goal of this is not, we have no interest in how much money any developer makes or doesn't make. Our goal is to meet our city's goals, which are more sustainable development. So, looking at places like Shoreline, where their new development is 96%, produces 96% less greenhouse gas emissions than the older developments do. Things like that to show people that these are the goals we're trying to achieve, and here's how we're trying to get there. The affordable housing and these, like I like to talk about, right? Carrots, sticks, and partnerships. We have the sticks, which are the requirements. We have the carrots, which are the incentives, and then our partnerships with organizations like Arch to try to achieve these goals. So really appreciate that, and I think the more we can kind of get these questions and answer them and provide those answers straight up to people, I think would be great. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
I think, and I agree with your points, and these are items that we will explore in the responses to the SEIS. I know that there's been questions submitted about those already.
That's excellent. And yeah, again, to the extent that we can give as deep and thorough of answers as we can so people don't think we're trying to skirt them, I think that's great. I know when we had a meeting and we talked about things like, safety, how are we addressing that, and some of the finances where people are saying that, we're gifting public funds to developers. If we can just really tackle those head on and show that, no, we're not. The development will bring in this revenue. They're doing their part. The city will do our part, right? The stormwater, building out the stormwater, we're not investing in that, right? The developer's doing all of that, and that's actually going to improve the environmental conditions, not only at the top of the hill, but down the hill from that. I think that's going to be really important, so people know, our intentions are still environmental, affordable housing, addressing things like the comment that we should be taking care of the residents who live here. Well, we currently have, right now, according to the 2024 census data, we currently have 23,266 people 18 and under. So I think that, building this type of housing is meeting the needs of the more than 23,000 people who live here, and as one of our commenters made, will eventually need housing, and that doesn't even count. Remember, I counted the childbirths based on population numbers and birth rates, where we've actually created almost 11,000 new humans here in Sammamish. So I do think we need to be providing housing for all of them, and appreciate addressing those goals.
Thank you. Councilmember Gupta, but you've already gone once, so I'm going to Councilmember Treen now.
Thank you, Mayor. So for Jeff, how much of the $235,732 have you already spent on this project? Maybe I can ask this a different way if you don't know exactly what that is, which is fine with me at this point, is This money right here is money that we didn't need to spend. It was not necessary for us to meet our comprehensive plan. So so that being said, you've sent us a presentation here, and so thank you for that. Would you please email that presentation? It's the first time I've seen this presentation, so it'd be nice if you could send that to me so I could see it. The next question would be on page 1 of your presentation. You make a statement on this first page of your presentation. Can you bring that back up, please? I'll wait. That's okay. No problem. Before that, the very first page. Yes, thank you. This is the planning context of, so I'm trying to, because I was trying to get an idea of, so the plan is to, well, I'm going to just say it out loud, expand the town center, or to look at the possibility of expanding the town center. In your very first statement, it says the town center plan and code are not delivering desired community outcomes. And I'm just wondering where that comment came from or who made that comment.
I did from our look at the plan, the existing conditions report, and the code audit.
And based on your analysis of those documents, you're saying that our community desires something different then?
Well, I think
than the 2008 town center plan, which would be the no option or no action.
What I was referring to is what is envisioned in the 2008 town center plan has not been delivered in large part, meaning the green spine, the town center, the streets, the retail amenities, not even referring to housing, although that has not kept pace with what was envisioned in the plan either.
And did you do any analysis as to why that has occurred?
Yes, I did.
And what would be your professional opinion why that hasn't happened?
Because the code is overly cumbersome, difficult to administer, and the densities are not aligned with the development standards, and the incentives have been exhausted such that these projects cannot move forward.
And if those, if they would actually move forward the projects that they have placed, those incentives would be still in play? Like if he uses up the TD and actually builds the TDRs and uses his TDRs and actually builds them, does it open up more TDRs from King County?
No.
No. Okay. And so
not directly. There could be more that could theoretically be authorized, but it's not like it doesn't get refilled automatically.
Right, but there would be ability then after that to then go back to King County and say, hey, we would like to save some trees in these areas and transfer those development rights into the city.
I suppose that's possible.
Well, because a lot of the things that I've heard so far tonight is expectations, hopes, likes, excitements about things to come. And so one of the things that my hope would be is that we would continue a TDR program that would be not only outside the city, but also inside, as mentioned by Councilmember Gupta. All right, so the other thing that, I want to be really careful here because the fact that we are, from the code, are we going to, public works, and I'm looking at street standards, when does that come to us or to the public?
Well, the street standards, like the graphic I showed you, that will actually be in the plan itself, or no, sorry, that's in the plan. It's also in the code itself, in the core part of it, because part of the form-based code is using the streets for how we regulate development. The more detailed standards we're working through with Public Works, but those are like standard details for how you score your concrete and lighting and those types of things. So like the basic cross-section and what's in there will be in this draft code. And is also in the plan that's already been released.
It's in the, which plan?
I believe we have the street sections in the draft plan.
Including Southeast 6th?
Well, we don't have all the capital projects, but I'm saying we have street standards for sort of the generic, street types that are envisioned in the plan and in the code. So we don't have like every street. Like if you're referring to like a capital project.
That's ongoing right now?
Yeah, that would be developed by the city's consultant that it's hired to do that project, not us.
So I guess my challenge here is, again, the cart before the horse. So we have street standards or we don't have street standards. But for the 6th Street project, is it built on standards or is it just?
Well, the standards that we've developed haven't been adopted yet, so it'll be based on the standards that are in place today. And because it's a city-led project, I would imagine there's some flexibility around that. But the standards that we've developed haven't been adopted yet, so.
And if for some reason we were to change the no action policy to have some form of action, or take the action policy and bring it and reduce it down to something that's manageable and affordable, is that possible to do as well?
Yeah, absolutely. You can choose any components, and this is what was done in the 2008 EIS, right? They selected something that was a combination, but you can choose anything that was covered in the environmental review. So from 2,000 to 4,000 units, or any other feature of the plan and EIS that was studied could be incorporated into the preferred alternative.
Yeah, because everything you presented in this presentation is kind of why I want to see it again. You know, I just see Redmond. I mean, everything, all the pictures you're showing me, it's like, okay, let's just take what's in Redmond and just plop it on the top of the hill. Based on your pictures and some of the description in this form base.
But isn't a lot of downtown Redmond similar to the Sky Apartments?
No, not really.
Well, it's all mid-rise construction of mixed-use buildings. From my perspective, it seems very similar in terms of the type of building, construction, and configuration. Because once you go beyond that, then you're talking high-rises, which Redmond, I think, is starting to talk about, but not something we're considering here.
So, all right. Seems like a bad idea to me, though, as far as the character of our city, to just be bringing in something that looks like Redmond.
But just a question, I mean, the Sky Apartments is allowed today. We're proposing the same building height and standards unless the council selects the incentive approach, which remains to be seen. So it's the difference is that you wouldn't have to have 10 acres of land in the diagram we showed, or you wouldn't have to necessarily use the TDRs in order to be able to build it. But that's why no development is happening now, is because people can't deliver feasible projects and they can't use the incentives.
Yeah, we paid for a feasibility study and it pretty much said there wasn't anything feasible unless it went over 15 stories.
No, that was not. We didn't actually study.
Townhomes, sorry, we could do townhomes too.
We looked at townhomes, we looked at mid-rise construction, and we looked at garden-style apartments. We didn't look at high-rises, which I could tell you without doing that analysis that would not be a feasible construction type in Sammamish, because the costs of construction are too high and the rents are not high enough.
So what you're proposing is a plan that's not feasible. Thank you.
Councilmember O'Farrell.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you for your presentation. I really liked the form-based code. I think we talked about that before, and I think that's a really good idea. I'd like to see that the green building codes are showing up again, and we're going to come back and revisit those maybe next year. Also, I like that the idea that you talk about that green zone, or where we would bring in a lot more green features into town centre, which feels more like the city of Sammamish, and that we could put our own fingerprint on it. And we're also not proposing to expand the size of town centre. The boundaries of town centre are what they are, so there's no expansion of town centre happening. It's just that we've redone that map and we've kind of condensed the zones, but we're not expanding the boundaries of town centre. I just want to be clear about that, right?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you. I was interested in the slide you had about parking.
Yeah.
And if you could just kind of tell me a little bit about that again, in that, as we all know, parking is always a topic of discussion for all of us wherever we go. So when you're saying that these are like the minimum parking requirements, and so a developer may decide to offer more. Is that likely? I mean, I know, because I know parking is an extremely expensive facility to offer from the point of a developer, but so when you, for example, let me just see, so when you look at, say, maybe townhomes, so it's like half a space to one per unit. So does that mean parking like on the street, or is that if they provide a driveway?
It depends on the way that the code is written in terms of whether the city wants to give credit for on-street, but many cities do. It would just mean that you could only require one stall however you want to require it, whether that would be off-street in like a garage or a parking lot, or if you want to give credit, say, for the frontage of that unit. The city just couldn't require more than that. To answer your question about what they're likely to build, I got into parking back in 2010 because it's the issue, as you said, everyone cares about and wants to talk about. One of my first projects, and I've done parking all over the country for a number of cities, was called the Right Size Parking Project, and it was a big effort through King County with a federally funded grant to go and look at multifamily developments throughout King County, and we had to send people in the middle of the night to count the cars when the residents were there. And the result of it was that on average in King County, multifamily projects were providing 0.4 more stalls than there was actual demand. And as part of that effort, we started to quantify what that meant in terms of economics, right? Back then, parking was cheaper, but let's say now a stall is maybe $80,000 for an underground parking stall. So if you have a project and let's say you overbuilt that by 100 stalls, doesn't sound like that much. You just spent, many millions of dollars. Now you have something you have to maintain that isn't generating revenue or being used. And as part of that project, we also worked for some individual cities to help them implement it. And there was this really interesting map, and you can go and take a look at it, that predicts parking demand based on a number of factors. And so cities use that to either right-size their parking requirements, which would be to set them what the results of the analysis showed, or go with what was called a market-based system, where either was no requirement or was very low. And through a number of discussions with developers and folks that I've worked with, there's a lot of things built into the system that want to produce more parking. So like the financing might require it because they don't think it's going to be marketable if it has enough parking. So some of it's going to depend on the type of product that they're trying to develop. One of the things here is that you can't require parking for affordable housing, and I think there's an assumption that affordable housing, they don't need parking, they'll just take transit. And it's actually the complete opposite of that. And cities are now looking at it as more of an equity issue, because if you have a job, right, and you need a car to do it, which is very common, you can't take transit, even if you're next to the transit station, right? So everyone's got personal circumstances that need to be considered, and access to a vehicle is not just for people that live in market housing. It's really important for affordable housing as well. So with that in mind, I do suspect that in many cases, folks will choose to build more than this. But the big purpose of this is that you're not requiring people to build more parking than they otherwise would. And frankly, if you really look at the analysis of what's driving the cost of housing or make it infeasible, it's parking requirements is like the number one thing. So it provides more flexibility, and I would expect, again, can't say for sure, in many instances they will build more parking than this.
Okay. As just an observation from driving around, going to, I guess, at a movie theater at the weekend, and it's in a part where it seems like this parking lot is only used maybe 50% of the time, and
Yeah.
we just have this swaths of land that's given over to parking spaces that, say, in the 90s and the 2000s we used quite a bit, but we're no longer going to those areas because either the services that are being offered are not required anymore at the same frequency with which they were. And I just wonder when I see these kind of wide open parking lots that are, for the most part, it appear to me, just from an anecdotal level, vacant most of the time. And I wonder if that's kind of potential development land that could be used in a better way, that maybe all the parking stalls that are there could be put into a high-rise parking structure and we could get some housing on there. And it's just something I see kind of in surrounding areas, not necessarily here in Sammamish, but in the kind of surrounding areas that we have lots of opportunity for that. But.
There's also the, in the draft code, there's the potential for shared parking, which works well, particularly for mixed-use buildings, because when the resident is at home, in the evening, if it's a business that operates during the day, then they're not seeing that same kind of demand. So that one parking space can be shared between different users, between the retail user and the apartment user.
Okay.
It's pretty common.
Okay, wonderful. All right, thank you for that.
Councilmember Gupta.
Yes, apologies for the second round of questions. Just for the eco factor, I understand there's like a threshold where you achieve points. Is there some thought to offering incentives for, if you meet the threshold, you have to, but if you go above and beyond? I know there are only so many levers we can pull, but.
Yeah, it's certainly something we've talked about. I think up until this point, we've been sort of more focused on the fundamental pieces of it. That might be something good for us to research and see if other cities are using it that way. But yeah, certainly if there was something we could offer in terms of flexibility for, exceeding that minimum threshold, I think that's something we could definitely look at, yeah.
Great. And then following up on Councilmember O'Farrell's comments for parking, maybe this is something that comes up as we tackle the green building codes, but if we do have a bunch of parking, maybe we can put solar panels on top, make that productive, impervious surface in some way. Not that that's the only solution, but just if we're going to see that built, it seems like there are opportunities to have that space work for us. So is that something that would come through the green building code? Is that potentially?
Potentially. I mean, at some point, it'll hopefully be kind of one thing. But yeah, I mean, that's something we could look at. We have talked about, maybe some limited surface parking in some of the lower intensity zones to make the projects more feasible. And that certainly would lend itself to some covered parking and maybe solar panels or some integration of open space with that. So yeah, we can take a look at that.
Great, thank you.
Councilmember Lamb. Sorry, I was gonna go. So it appears that what will be happening is that you'll be working on this draft, incorporating people's comments over a period of time until such time as we feel like we've got a solid solution. I'd like to better understand what drives the opinion that developers find this cumbersome and difficult to use. How have you gotten this feedback?
Well,
and how do we hope to resolve it? Is it something you'd be able to go back to them and say, okay, we fixed this part, now is it better? I'm trying to figure out how we balance that part.
Yeah, a combination of things. So we did our own code audit, and we have written lots of codes. I've done permitting for 10 years, working with codes, so have some learned experience. You have a great planning staff. They all basically have the same feedback that they find it very challenging to be able to administer. I think that's no more evident than just trying to calculate density under the code. It's like next to impossible to get two, accomplished planners to have the same answer.
Yeah.
Very difficult. We talked with the, development community. They all gave us kind of the same feedback. They operate in other cities. And like I have stated many times tonight, I think it was all well-intentioned, but it just is not a workable solution in terms of being able to administer that code. So it was a number of pieces, but I would say that the feedback has been very consistent from, large developers, small property owners. It's been fairly universal in terms of the feedback.
Okay.
And then in addition to that, the UZDP versus the master plan. Right now, the UZDP is essentially redundant to the commercial site development permit or plan. It's an extra step that likely isn't necessary and doesn't achieve, the desired outcomes of what that planning process should be. So combining that, having a master plan that's optional and more targeted to the larger properties, and then combining it concurrently with the CSDP, I think would be a benefit. Yeah.
And in your experience, how long could this process take? Because I could see this kind of refinement going on for more than a couple of months.
Yeah, there is always that potential with code projects, but we have done a number of large-scale, much larger than this even, projects for the city of Sammamish. So we're very familiar with the community, and we've been trying to listen to all the feedback that we've been given. And what we've also found in our other projects here is that we tend to put a lot of emphasis on the early process to really figure out what the problems are and make connections in the community, and then be able to develop solutions that feed from that. I will say, when you get to the point of having a draft code, there often can be quite a bit of discussion. I think this happened on one of the prior projects. And I always tell folks that I'm working with, sometimes you just, you got to be responsive and you have to work through those discussions. That's why sometimes the review process might take a little bit longer, and I think that's okay because we want people to feel comfortable with it. So those are some of the tactics that I've used on code projects with success, and it's really about communication, trust, right? Big trust piece of it, listening to folks, being responsive to their comments, taking a little bit more time if we need to be able to adjust something, and being accessible for people that have questions or feedback during the process.
We have just over 2 months to kind of wrap things up, essentially. And I'm confident that framework can get this work done from what I've seen. And we've made a lot of progress since January. So, now that we have the drafts in hand, I think now is the time to start refining them and, getting exactly what we want out of them.
Okay, great. Well,
And then-
thank you for this progress.
Yeah, thank you.
Appreciate it. Deputy Mayor Lamb.
I just had a question on the TDRs. So it's my understanding that even if the TDR program was workable right now, that there's not, the sending sites aren't there, that we're limited in sending sites, that, like, the sites wouldn't want to be used for conservation, or there's not enough. So by that reasoning, the TDR program wouldn't be able to be used. Is that true?
That is true, but I think the big difference is that right now, that would prevent projects from going forward, right? Because you can't achieve the densities you would need to bring forward a feasible project unless you were doing something like townhomes. Whereas now it'll be more of a complement, where you could choose to do it in lieu of affordable housing and provide that public benefit. So it won't be as fundamental to being able to develop as it is today, but there's still the same, it would still deliver the same benefits in terms of land preservation for those applicants that choose to use it.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Oh. Councilmember Stewart.
Sorry, one other thing I've just been sort of contemplating, right? I mean, the original town center plan was passed in 2008, which, I can't believe was 17 years ago now, right? And certainly things have changed a lot. I know that part of our goal here is to help to streamline, and not just because we want to help the development community, but because the state is requiring us to all look at this, right? Because we know that the shortage of housing in general and affordable housing in particular has only become more acute since the crash of the housing market in 2008, which, this plan was passed before anybody really understood the depth of issues that crash would cause, and the years that we'd be recovering from that. So I guess my question is, people are concerned if we consider things like looking at how many housing units that, somehow magically 3,000 more housing units are going to pop up tomorrow. Even with things being streamlined, what kind of timeline projection would you envision us even building out an additional 1,000 units, even just to hit the current 2,000 limit? And I know that that's a guess, but I mean, just based on, right now, the housing market is not right there. There's not a lot of building going on. I think the economic uncertainty is probably going to last for a few more years. I'm not anticipating a lot of growth happening in the next couple of years, but what are the the professionals saying?
Yeah, it's a good question. A couple of things I will say. I mean, one is this is all responsive to global, national economic conditions, which is a huge factor right now. So there's a lot of uncertainty. So it's difficult to say what exactly would play out in the future. What I can say more confidently is if this changes not go forward, the city's not likely to see a huge uptick in housing production. To date, the city has seen 326 units developed in town center over the 17-year period. And this is discussed in the EIS in the housing section, which is talking about the underproduction of housing resulting from the current plan. If the changes go forward, that would theoretically streamline things, but there's still going to be challenges for delivering some of those projects until construction costs come down and interest rates come down.
And that's been revised. So this time last year and through January, the outlook for multifamily was much better. And they were anticipating at the beginning of 26, interest rates would come down and things would settle down a little bit more.
Yep.
That's changed over the last 6 months.
Yeah.
So that outlook is a bit different.
Yeah, and typically, for projects that haven't gone through the review process or at the early stages, it's a couple of years just to get to production. So yes, this is not a proposal for one project to deliver several thousand units. It would happen, over time. Again, difficult to say with any certainty exactly how many units would be built. But I think if the current plan and code stay in place, I think you're going to see more of the same, not a lot of action in terms of apartment buildings or development at that scale. I think townhouses are feasible right now and not a whole lot else, and that's what you're seeing proposed. And I think, again, all of those limitations make it more difficult to deliver the retail and amenities that sort of rely on that to be able to fund and pay for.
That's my biggest concern with the current plan and the current code, is that these townhomes continue. Which it's nice. It's not single-family detached, and it introduces some diversity, but not at $2 million apiece. And that's what we're seeing, and we run the risk of, without some intervention, not being able to introduce diverse and affordable housing into the town center. Instead, it's all townhomes that are $1.5 to $2.5 million.
Yeah, thank you for that. I mean, I think that that's important, right? That the things we're looking at now aren't things we're doing for this moment. They're things that we're doing because we believe the town center will be around for, probably 50 years before it gets a huge facelift. So whatever we plan for and build, we're looking at those future generations, because I would imagine it will take decades for us to build this out, and we want it to be something. We don't want it to be like one of those things where people plan and build a bridge, and then everybody's like, why did you only make it 4 lanes? Why didn't you make it 8, right? I mean, because by the time it gets done and you see things come out, it's usually not what people need and isn't everything that everybody wanted. And I think being able to support that retail and having the services and the businesses that people on the plateau want and have been asking for, and being able to keep our tax dollars here is also important for us to not only diversify our housing, but diversifying our revenue streams as well. All right, thank you so much. Appreciate that.
Well, if there are no more questions, we can let you flee.
Thank you.
Thank you for your time.
Oh, no, thank you. Thank you for the helpful answers to questions. We appreciate you taking the time. We'll be moving on now to a potential resolution adopting the Pine Lake Creek Basin Plan. Audrey Starcy, Greg Stamatu, and Toby Cohen should be here.
Toby, you look very lonely there at the table by yourself.
We started at 3, down to 2, and now 1. That's the button. Thank you. Good evening, Mayor, Deputy Mayor, Council, City Manager. Toby Kanan with the Stormwater Engineer with Public Works, and Greg Stamatio is joining me online to help present. As we noted, this is a follow-up to our April 15th presentation with the Pine Lake Creek Basin Plan. We've made some updates, and we are ready to ask the Council to adopt that. Real brief overview of our presentation. I'm going to give you some context of what this is all about again, just as a gentle reminder. Talk about the process we went through and ultimately lead to a motion to adopt. Starting with why this project. Basin planning is important. This is something that was identified initially with our 2016 Stormwater Comprehensive Plan. It's been advanced through the retrofit strategy and the Stormwater Management Action Plan. And it's also a key component of the city's stormwater municipal permit, which is a requirement. And finally, this is a reflection of the enhanced level of service that was adopted through the recent rate study. Shifting gears a little, why this basin in particular? Why the Pine Lake Creek Basin? This is, through the retrofit strategy, every basin within the community was looked at. And this one was identified as kind of the next on the list, if you will, because of the inherent value of the basin, as well as the opportunities that existed for potential improvements. And so next slide. Okay. The basin planning is roughly a 2-year process. We've kind of distilled that down into this one slide. The Pine Lake Creek Basin is one of 14 within the community, one of the biggest ones. And it's, again, typical of, that, side of the plateau that drains down through a stream and into Lake Sammamish. The midsection here kind of shows, the process that we went through in pursuing the basin plan. Ultimately a lot of homework up front, listening to neighbors, listening to stakeholders, generating some ideas, and ultimately translating those into program strategies and projects. The outcome of this is our plan. That was attached to the agenda bill. I noticed there were some problems with the resolution of the photographs. We apologize for that. That's being corrected. But that is moving forward. So next slide. Ultimately, this is, this project is, I guess I'd characterize it as a win. There's a lot of successes about this. One of the takeaways that we learned was really the basin health is in quite good shape. They touched on the forest canopy within the community, and this is one of the more densely forested areas of the city, with roughly half the basin wooded, which is pretty unusual in a bedroom community. The water quality sampling, the hydrologic modeling, all those things pointed to, a basin that's in generally good shape. The second thing we learned was that, the systems within the basin are functioning quite well. The stream systems and natural stream systems and the wetlands, those are really operating fairly well for an urban environment. And then the built facilities as well are generally functioning, as we would hope they would. A lot of them admittedly are fairly old, so they're kind of handicapped by that. But generally things are operating as we would hope. based on that, we came away with a fairly limited list of capital projects that we wanted to advance. There's 6 in particular that kind of made the list. 2 of them are already underway on our CIP. So there's a couple success stories there. Next slide. Quick schedule update. As I noted, we're asking for adoption today, so this frankly represents the culmination of the Basin Plan. Since we last spoke, we've gone through the environmental review and the SEPA process. We received exactly 0 comments, which I like to think is a representation of a wonderful plan. We made, some clerical changes to the plan, changing dates and what have you, and now we're here asking for adoption. So, next slide. With the conclusion of that plan, that kind of sets in motion, what's next? What are the next steps? And I think you're all familiar with this graphic. It kind of illustrates how, the plans and the ideas and what have you get advanced, through the broader departmental planning, and then ultimately rolled into our CIP, and then, looked at in our budget cycle. So, you follow the bright blue arrow to, left to right to end up where we're going to end up with capital projects. The next slide then. So, that's kind of the before and after story. 2 years worth of work involved here, and we're respectfully asking council to adopt the plan and the resolution. If you have questions, I'm happy to answer those up front. Greg's online as well, so we can feel free to ask away.
Well, thank you, Greg. Thank you for the presentation. Council, I'm looking for folks to come online. Questions? Anybody? There we go. Deputy Mayor Lamb.
So I had a question about septic, and I did see in the plan that for septics, there was a strategy not recommended. Concerns about failing systems can be reported to King County Health for inspection, and I do see that within the recommendations that there is continuing education for the people that live in the basin area. I also know that septic systems the lifespan is 20 to 40 years, depending on the system that you have. And there are now, out of the 38 King County cities, we're number 37 in terms of septic systems that are 30 plus years. We have 2,400 septic systems that could fail. And that is a huge concern in King County, that the overall number of septic systems that are within that lifespan. So I know that there's only so much we could do, but I do think there's an opportunity for, at least when we do educational outreach, to ask people or to let them know, hey, have you inspected your septic? And we should know, like, based on the age of the home, if they have a septic system. So is that possible to include that in any education that we do?
It is, and this came up during one of our stakeholder meetings. One of the participants is a commissioner with Sam Platte Sewer and Water District. The topic was generally, can we make people hook up to sewer? That was a notion that was advanced. And, we had a real nuanced discussion about, what are the limits of the city's ability to push? What are the limits of the district's ability to push as well? And, how active can King County Health Department play a role in, motivating people to make changes? And I think you hit the nail on the head by identifying, education really is the thing, because I don't think anybody wants to have a failing septic system. They would want to fix the problem. So, to that end, I think the city is absolutely behind supporting that. And, at this point, the framework's in place through the Basin Plan, to advance an education and outreach program, if you will, that kind of targets some of these specific needs. So this is absolutely the ground level to get in on that, and include those ideas. So I appreciate the suggestion.
Yeah, that would be great. I understand. I mean, hooking up to sewer is so expensive, and not everybody can afford that. But to just have the education that you are within that limit, and you really need to be aware of taking care of your system.
Yeah, thank you.
Does that need to be an amendment? I mean, I'm happy to support this, but it's actually not in the plan.
Yeah, the education program is in the plan. And we don't really identify specific elements of that. And I guess I'll defer, to leadership to, explore whether that needs to be, incorporated in there, or how that might be advanced.
I think leaving the outreach plans as flexible as possible, where we're not dictating exactly what is down to the letter, is advantageous to the city, so that as new information becomes available, the plan can be adjusted accordingly. So while we can do that, it's not something that is absolutely necessary either.
So, yeah, at this point, there really are no explicit identified elements that are going to be within the education. I think the things we did here, a lot of it's centered around Pine Lake, behaviors of lakefront homeowners. Septic was another one. Some of the streamside residents, there's, curious about what they could do. So that, it's a pretty organic process, but I think what we anticipated was, doing some additional outreach, to kind of solicit feedback and direction with that education program. But I don't know that the basin plan itself was really intended to, catalog those explicit education goals, other than recognizing a need to advance outreach and, carry that forward, putting a framework in place to carry it forward.
I mean, I understand that, but I also understand that there's definitely a need through the King County Board of Health. I mean, they are very concerned about throughout King County that there are all these failing systems. So I guess I'm not 100% confident, especially when we have the opportunity to do outreach, that we're not going to do it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I wouldn't be opposed to incorporating that as a friendly amendment. I think it would require an adjustment to the plan. And I think staff would have to, circle back to figure out what that would look like, subject to, it really need to be done before the plan was adopted, I guess. So trying to juggle that reality with, what's before council tonight.
Discussion of what goes into that is a component of partnership as well, where City of Sammamish Public Works doesn't maintain the sewer utility or private septic requirements. So,
right.
So it'd have to be a discussion with both of those, and what is the responsibility of each partner as well to come up with an overall strategy of outreach program for that discussion.
Okay. I mean, really, I guess I'm just looking for something simple, that if you're going to do outreach, that the outreach includes some kind of component about taking care of your septic system. I mean, nothing really beyond that.
Deputy Mayor, if I may, well, I appreciate wanting to do it for this particular basin plan. I think if this is something that council is sort of head nodding and that is important, I think we might want to sort of reflect that across all of our basin work. Excuse me. And so I would offer that rather than doing it targeted to this one in particular, that we hold that as a higher level piece for us to come back as part of our overall outreach around when we do work with the community around different basins. Because I think it makes sense to get at, system-wide, if you will, rather than basin plan specific.
Okay. Thank you.
Councilmember Gupta.
Yeah, thank you for the presentation, for all your work on this. I think I was on one of the very first meetings on community, on like stakeholder input. a couple of years ago. So exciting to see this come to fruition. Sort of following in Deputy Mayor Lamb's comments, I know for the capital projects, a lot of the initial list was struck off because it was involving private property, which I understand the restrictions from. I know there's been some interest from Trout Unlimited, which does riparian restoration, to work with those property owners. So I just want to make sure that we keep that in mind, play whatever role we can to help that come along, because I think that is really important. And also just for the education piece, I know Lake Sammamish Urban Wildlife Refuge Partnership, there we go, and Mid-Sound Fisheries have put together a lot of informational materials for property owners, especially on the lake, mostly in Lake Sammamish from what I understand, but certainly would apply to Pine Lake as well. So as the city is putting together some sort of outreach material, I think a lot of that already exists, so we can, hopefully partner with them and just say, hey, these are residents from our community that we're trying to get in touch with. Let's work together to disseminate this information, because we're all working towards the same goal, which is a healthy watershed. That's all I had. I'm happy to make the motion if we have comments. Okay.
Councilmember Treen.
Yes, I was going to move to resolution number Mic isn't even on. So I move to approve resolution number R20251, long day, 1110, adopting the Pine Lake Creek Basin Plan, including Exhibit 1, Resolution PLCCBP adoption, and Exhibit 2, the Pine Lake Creek Basin Plan.
Second.
Would you like to speak to your motion?
I'd just like to say this is 5 years of being on the council, and we just keep kind of clicking off the basin plans as we've been going. So I look forward to this one being put into play and the implementation of it. Look forward to seeing the plans onto the CIP and then the decisions that we'll have to make when it comes to budgeting for that. Do appreciate the council's work on doing the enhanced version of our stormwaters program. So that's always a big plus for the environment and for the community. And look forward to our next basin plan. So thank you very much, Toby, for all of your work. And can we say anything else about
Sure.
you? I'm going to miss you.
Yeah, thank you. I'm retiring.
So
yeah.
It's been a real
Congratulations.
Yeah, it's been a real pleasure to work with you. So thank you, Toby.
Anyway,
Thank you, Toby.
No, I appreciate it.
One of our few remaining employees who lives in the city,
Yeah.
who can afford to live in the city.
Will continue to live in the city.
Excellent.
So thank you.
Okay, well, we'll hold you to that.
All right.
And council, if we could vote, please. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you very much for your time and for your service to the city.
Thank you. Appreciate
Thank
it.
you, Toby.
Mayor Howe, I just had a clarification.
Yes.
So similar to this item, item 9 included a plan and a resolution, and I would, in consultation with the attorney, to adopt the resolution as well. If we could go back to that item. I have the suggested motion there on the screen.
Sid, you want to do that?
I move to approve resolution. That's the art strategic plan.
What, we didn't do that?
Yeah, we didn't do the.
We just, the council approved the art strategic plan, but did not approve the resolution.
I see. I move to approve resolution number R2025-1109, adopting the city's first art strategic plan.
Second.
First and seconded. Would you like to speak to your motion?
Thumbs up.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you very much. And now with that exciting little addition there, we will go on to council reports, city managers' reports. Mr. City Manager, would you like to give a report?
Thank you, Mayor. Just briefly, as I know it's getting late in the evening, just want to remind that the city is honoring Juneteenth on Thursday, and city offices will be closed for the day in honor of that, of Juneteenth. Also, I want to reiterate what Jeff and Matt said earlier. There is a town center open house on the draft code, which is different than the SEIS, just to confuse. It sounds very similar but different. On Wednesday, the 25th, that is in concert with the farmers market. And equally as important and exciting, it is June 25th is our Pride celebration in concert with the Farmers Market. We are super pleased to be working with our partners, including the Farmers Market, the Chamber, the YMCA, and other community partners to put on our Pride event this year. We are excited to have everybody come out and join us, and looking forward to seeing everybody out and celebrating Pride Month. So with that, Mayor, back to you.
Thank you. Council, what do you have that you would like to share?
I have a Board of Health meeting on Wednesday, and I shared the agenda. The main topic is on infant mortality rates and the differences between the different ethnicities.
Thank you.
Mayor Howe and I will be attending the Association of Washington Cities annual conference next week. I'm sure we'll have plenty to report when we return.
God, is that next week? Other reports? Okay, I had a flood control meeting this morning, and there's some updates into the criteria that King County is going to be using going forward that may shift where projects get placed and how they get placed in terms of priority. So that will be fun to wade through. And with that, oh, sorry.
Yeah, I forgot we had our Eastside Transportation Partnership meeting on Friday. It seems like a really long time ago, but that was just like 5 days ago. I thought it was a really good meeting. There's a lot of interest on the east side from the cities on looking at different ways to create transit, particularly for things like the last mile. So I think in the coming months, we're going to do some deeper dives on what that looks like, how we might be able to work together or learn from each other and really be able to put some of those types of shuttle services and things in place. So I think that will be very beneficial. That's part of our transit plan to include some of that in there as well. So I think there's a lot of good stuff there.
And I'll just mention that I was at Blackwell Elementary, and the kids, I thought I was going to be reading to them. And instead, they basically recited our land acknowledgement from memory. They sang a song with all of your names in it. Their penmanship is so much better than mine. These are second graders, and the artwork is spectacular. So this is a memento that will be treasured, but you really should take a look because it is just super fun to go through. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All those say aye. Aye. We're adjourned. Thank you.